Hello, I'm Bob Banana. I'm going to just do a quick demonstration on how to get pointers for an auto splitter in Spyro Reignited Trilogy. This is going to be applicable to most other games as well, but I will be talking about nuances specifically with Reignited. So you'll need Cheat Engine. I don't know if there's like a newer version of Cheat Engine. I'm just on 7.4. It shouldn't be like too important to have like the most recent version, but I think like whatever, it's fine. The very first thing is you want to attach Cheat Engine to the game. So once you've loaded it up, you just hit this icon here and select Reignited Trilogy. And now anything that you scan will specifically scan for Spyro Reignited Trilogy. For this demonstration, I'm going to be doing Dragon Count specifically. There's a few other things you could obviously do, like gem counts, level names, boss health, things like that. And each have their own kind of little quirks, and I'll talk about them later, but I just want to go through the process of actually getting the pointers. It's a bit repetitive, so I've already done it twice, and I'll just go through it a third time. So first thing is loading up the game. And I'm going to specifically be doing Dragon Count. Once we skip the cutscene. So first off, I'm going to say, well, we have 0 dragons. What we're doing here is we're saying what value we want to search for. And then we just hit scan. I generally just leave this on 4 bytes. This is like the type of value that we're scanning for. If you're searching for like a string, for like a level name or cutscene name, use that, but generally 4 bytes or just normal byte for like 1 and 0 is also doable. So anyway, 0, we have 0 dragons at the moment. We'll do a scan and it's getting a lot of results because there's obviously a lot of things in the game that just become 0. So let's go get our first dragon. Right now the value is 1. We change this to a 1 and hit next scan. This happens if there's like a lot of things that's still processing. This tends to happen if you just scan 0 at the start. You can obviously skip scanning for 0 and start at 1 once you've got the first dragon and kind of save this time. But essentially what this is trying to do is process all the addresses it found via the first scan and actually check what they were correctly and then compare it again with the 1. So this will take like a minute. Okay, so after scanning for 1, we have 18,000 memory addresses that were 0 when we first scanned and 1 when we scanned it the second time. But we can see, you know, these values are kind of changing now, doing some weird stuff. So we can say, well, it's still 1. We can scan again. Cut it in half. So let's get another dragon. It's now 2. Now we have 106. So we'll go get another dragon, and we're just going to keep doing this until we get down to like 5 or so addresses. It's now 3. And now it's 4. There's 16 addresses. It's pretty easy to think, oh, well, it could be any of these. Except these ones that are clearly changing. So that's why I like to just, you know, collect some gems or kill some enemies sometimes. But we notice when we go into a level, some of these values change a lot. So one thing I like to do when looking for these addresses is really look at what is happening to these values when you do stuff to the game. Like when you enter a level, when you kill enemies, collect gems. One thing I have noticed is doing a quick game continue can reset your addresses. So don't quick game continue because you're going to basically reset all your work. Here's another value that is just wrong, so we can get rid of that just by, again, scanning 4. So from experience, what tends to happen here, see the ground, I can't see. I failed fairy proxy, that's fine, I'll just run around. One thing that tends to happen is with these memory dresses for dragons, is it'll overflow once it hits 10. Now I only know that because I've done this before. Dragon Pointer is one I've already gotten early this week. So it's more about experimenting with how these memory dresses actually work. So you can see at the moment, everything is saying 7, and they're kind of going up at the correct rate. Like there's nothing that seems kind of out of whack with each other. This will be the 8th dragon. So this memory dress here changed first. I don't know if you noticed that, but this one changed maybe half a second before the rest of them. I know that this memory dress is not the correct one, again from experimentation. But that's when you're doing these and you're trying to find the right memory address, that's just what you're going to have to do, is kind of experiment with which memory addresses seem to be the right ones, and then when you get pointers for them, what they do on reloading the game, what they do when you go into a different file, things like that. This address, for example, I've noticed sometimes it can kind of count. So it's 8 at the moment. If I quit game and went into a different file, it would continue to rise, even though that file may have 0 dragons. So that's why I know this address is not the correct one. So again, I just want to get 10 dragons to get rid of the ones that overflow. Alright, so here we have these 2 addresses at 10. The rest went back to 1, so we can get rid of all those. And I think it was this one that I said was no good. I can go get the 11th dragon to make sure. Cannot see. Difficult to play the game when you have a big box in the way. Yeah, so I trusted this one more than this one, purely from other runs. But initially you would probably go, oh well, this is changing faster, and for an auto splitter that's probably more accurate. But I think this one is more accurate to the actual dragon count. So now that we have an address that we're happy with, and again, there might be 3 addresses sometimes when you're looking at things like boss health or the level you're in, and so you might have to do this multiple times and interact with, you know, you go, okay, well, it could be any of these 3 addresses, and on each time you attempt this cycle, because this process that I've just done now, I've already done twice before. You have to do this multiple times. You get multiple pointers, and I'll explain why later. But yeah, you might not be interacting with a single address. You might be interacting with 3, and it gets very complex. So from here, I'm just taking the address number because I'm going to use that in a minute. Right click on the address and go generate pointer map. That's going to then ask me to save it. And I'm just going to save it as the same name. And then this is going to pop up, and this is basically saving all of the pointers that currently point to this address. So a few things to note about this is, I highly recommend that you make sure this address is still valid. What I mean by that is, don't quit game continue or load up a different file, something like that. Because we're looking for pointers that point to this particular address, but if you change what this address is by quitting game, then we're going to be looking for pointers that now point to this address, but this address is invalid. So keep this valid because we want the pointers that look at dragon count, which is this. Okay, so I now that that's done, I want to go pointer scan for this address, and that's going to bring this up. And I want to use a saved pointer map, which is this one. So this is my saved pointer map for this particular address. I want to go compare results with other saved pointer maps. And here I'm going to load up the scans that I did for the other files. Oh, that was the wrong one. So again, this process of getting 10 dragons and scanning for addresses, I've already done 2 times, and that's these. So what we're doing here is going the pointer scan that I did for this address just now, compare that with the pointer scans with these 2 addresses when I ran them. So what this will do is go any sort of pointers that are currently looking at this E420, which of those are the same as the ones that we're looking at D660 at the time that I generated that, when that was a valid address. We'll go okay, and I'm just going to save this as dragons. Now it's going to run through them all, and this can take a minute. If you add on more pointers, I think it takes longer. And now we have a very short list. This is, you normally get a list much bigger than this. In like the 10,000s. This is very lucky. It's meant to be the more pointers, the more addresses you find, the more this gets filtered down. But the other day I was experiencing this list just kept getting bigger and bigger, so I'm not exactly sure why that was, but either way. What this is saying, from the memory address of starting at the game and offsetting by this particular amount, we get an address. Read that value as an address, and then offset it by 290, and read that value as an address. Then take that address and offset it by 208, and read that value as an address, and keep going until you reach an address and offset it by 260, and then read that as a particular value that we at the moment expect is 11. So all of these are pointing to the same sort of address. The only difference between these two, for example, is these 2 addresses. So we're going from 208, point to an address, offset by 120, read that as an address, and offset that by 38, read that as an address, and it will point us to the same point of these 2. That's essentially what we're doing. We're just going from memory address, we're bunny hopping memory addresses. And at the end, it should point to our dragon count. So any of these should work. For demonstration purposes, I'm going to take, I don't know, this one. Actually, I'll just load all these because there's only 8. Importantly, it needs to be an address that starts with this Spyro Win64 shipping.exe. Specifically, this text here, this like thread stack is not correct. You can't use these ones. And that becomes important when we actually pull up the Autosplitter file. Right, so here we now have our pointers. And we want to just do a kind of health check on these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close the game. And I'm going to reopen it. So right now you can see all the addresses are dead, right? The pointers don't know what they're pointing to, and the values are nothing. So we're booting up the game and reattach the process. This ID will be different now, which makes sense. This is like the program ID. So now, even though we've attached, these values still don't know what they're pointing to, which makes sense because there is no current dragon count. Alright, let's load up. Okay, I guess I accidentally loaded a different file. Well, we can see if it works. Well, here, these two are pretty good. We can see these pointers, no good, right? They're doing some weird stuff. They're looking at weird addresses. They're bouncing around. These two aren't any good, and these two aren't any good. So this one looks pretty good. And this other one looks pretty good. One thing you can also do is go file. Oh, sorry, no. You can go back into pointer scan for this address, just on anything. Get rid of that pop-up and open the file. And you can see now, this is using like the same pointer and it's going, well, now it's pointing to this address. And he's currently 54. So let's just triple check that I do have 54 dragons. I do. Cool. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with these two. I'll get rid of these. And now we will use these pointers in our one of these pointers in our auto splitter. This is again kind of where the testing is really important. Like you can scan for pointers all day and maybe end up with one you're really happy with. But in general, this list that I showed earlier, this pointer scan results, here, like I said, you're generally going to end up with like 10,000 of these things. And some of them are going to work and some of them aren't. And you're just going to have to run it a few times, close the game a few times, boot up the game a few times, and go, yeah, okay, this pointer looks to be working well for me. And you're going to just have to ask people to test the auto splitter. There's not really any other way to go. You could be testing it for like 2 weeks to go, does this pointer work? And at the end of that 2 weeks, like, have no more understanding of whether or not it's a good pointer. So that's quite unfortunate. That's kind of the unfortunate thing, is they do need testing. But anyway, I want to take this particular one. But what this is, again, we're going from the base Spyro memory offset, and you can see it even here. When you offset by this address, you get, or this amount, you get this address. Going from that address and looking at 28, we read that as an address. Going off of that and going another 20, we'll read it as another address. And you keep going until you get to this final address, which is being read as 54. So all this is when you come into the auto splitter file, you just simply do something like this. So you have byte dragons, and we're saying already from the Spyro win shipping address, so that's this here. You need to exclude the exe. Go the base address, which is this, and then just comma value, comma value, comma value of each of these. And you can see the one I've got here is very similar. If I move this over here, so I've got dragons, the base is the same, 28, 20, 100, 8, 30. The only difference is this. But if I go, what is this, 27C, it still points to 54. It still points to the same base address. D60, 27C. Okay, it actually points to a different address, but the same value. So, like, again, you know, one of these pointers may be better than the other, and it just needs to be tested. It needs to have someone turn around and go, this actually didn't work for me. And so then we try a different pointer. But so far that hasn't happened. So, you know, you just have to experiment and try a bunch of stuff. The process is going to be the same for Game Pass, but if you're on Game Pass, you need to put it into this section instead, this different version. This is basically the auto splitter saying, you know, when I load up and detect I'm on the Steam version, what addresses do I use? When I load up and I'm on the Game Pass version, what addresses do I use. And this version is just simply set down here. We can detect the memory size of the game, and luckily for us, they are static and different for each version. So yeah, we're just using that. But that's all you have to do. So yes, you have to run through the dragons multiple times. Yes, you have to kind of experiment with which addresses are working, which ones are kind of doing weird stuff when you quit game continue. It is recommended that you close the game fully, boot up the game, reattach, run through the dragons again to really get like which ones are working when I restart the game rather than just open a new file. But it's just experimentation at the end of the day. Some weird pointers that I've found, sorry, I won't use the word pointers, some weird quirks that I've found with health. Actually, Boris informed me about this, is something like Sorceress health. If you've beaten Sorceress already, the pointer is different. So things like, mainly health is the only one I've detected, but you want to make sure that your kind of the file that you're using hasn't already done the thing that you're testing. So fighting Sorceress, both in the first level and in SBR, both of those I needed to make sure that I hadn't already beat the Sorceress, and I had to keep closing the game, reopening it, making sure the file was, you know, a pre-made save and was loading that pre-made save. So again, just constantly doing stuff like that. Other than that, there aren't a bunch of weird quirks. You can mainly do quitting out to game and starting a new file to treat it as if closing the game and starting again, for things like dragon count and stuff. But things that are like, are you in a game? Well, that you can't really check by changing files. It's you know, that's the full thing of Reignited. You have to reload the whole game. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say. If you have any questions, feel free to DM me or even just ask me in the Spyro Discord. I apologize if anything was like weird to understand. I just wanted to make like this actual repetitive process as simple as possible, because there are so many videos that like go over it and you're like, what the hell is happening? But I may have just forgotten to discuss something. So yeah, just let me know if you need any extra help.